Good morning and welcome to Hope, Faith, and Joy Daily Devotion with me, Pastor Amanda. It is Wednesday morning and we are taking a look at Genesis chapter 19. Now, we have some pretty intense situations happening in chapter 19. And there's the easy way to look at it, and there's the hard way to look at it. So I will kind of present both of them to you today, and I will tell you, but for myself, the hard one is the way I like to look at it the best, but it's a hard pill to swallow. But what we find today is that the angels, we were told that the three men that visited Abraham in yesterday's scripture, two of them were angels, and they went ahead into Sodom. And it says that they went in the evening time, and they happened to find Lot, who was in the middle of the square. Now, in the time and age that this was happening, when strangers would come into a town, they were allowed to sleep kind of in this open space in the town. But what was also kind of cool was that this is an opportunity for people to show hospitality to the stranger. So this is a time that hospitality is really important to the Hebrew people and their understanding of how they're supposed to treat others. So Lot's in the middle of the square. He sees the strangers come and he invites them to his home. And of course, they do the natural, no, that's okay, we'll stay here. And he goes, no, come to my house. So he's being a good Hebrew man by practicing this hospitality. Well, what we find out is once he has brought them home, we are told that the men of the town come to Lot's house and say, send out these men and we want to get to know them. And of course, it does have some abusive sexual implication in it. And so if we want to look at Sodom and Gomorrah simply as they're people who have issues, that's the easy way of looking at this. Because here we can just say, well, I don't behave that way and they deserve to be destroyed. And we're able to let the scripture go really quickly because we just blame their sexuality as the reason for their demise. Now, if we take this in the hard way, what we recognize here is that the men of the town are not practicing hospitality. They are not practicing hospitality. And all of a sudden, that's a hard pill to swallow because now how many of us can say there have been times where we've not practiced good hospitality? And we deserve this same judgment that this town did. I mean, that's a harder pill to swallow. And I think people prefer to just say, oh, blame it on that town's sexuality, take them off the earth, and good riddance. It's easier that way. But if we really look at it at the core, hospitality is what we need to look at. Because we need to question ourselves of how are we treating other people? And maybe the judgment really is against us. And so we have that going out. Now, of course, Lot, I think he has other issues because he did offer up his daughters. So I don't know that he was practicing great hospitality either. But the recognition that the family would be sacrificed to save the stranger. Does that not sound like somebody we know? Jesus sacrificing himself to save the stranger. So, I mean, there's these little hints here and there. But take it how you will this morning. You can take it the easy way. It was sexual sin and you can pass it off. Or you can take it kind of the hard way this morning and go, how does this speak to our hospitality to different people, to strangers and everything? So I'll let you sit with that one today. So what we find out then is that the angels tell Lot, we're going to just thank you for saving us. We're going to destroy this land. And go get anybody who you think needs to be saved because, we made this promise to Abraham. So go and save these folks. Well, he goes and gets like the men who are engaged to his daughters and stuff, and they're like, no, you're just teasing, whatever, we're going to stay here. So Lot is like, well, he kind of tries to gather up people, and they're not listening to him. And then the angels finally say it's time to go, and Lot's like trying to get his daughters and a wife together, and the angels finally just like kind of grab Lot, his wife, and the two daughters. So that's 4 people. They take 4 people and grab them and get them out of the city. Now, what's kind of interesting here is that if we think back to yesterday's scripture, God said to Abraham, if there are 10 people that are righteous, I won't destroy Sodom and Gomorrah. And what we find is that, so there's not 10 people, but he does go ahead and save the 4 and then destroys. So there's this thing about God's mercy. Like, God's going to save the righteous and merciful in these destructive moments. And so we can't quite comprehend who God is, because God could have just wiped out everybody no matter what, but there's this sense that God's justice and mercy is still at play in here, because saved the 4, kept his promise to Abraham, but kind of had to change it a little bit along the way. So God's still this very unpredictable predictable relationship that we have, and we can't quite pin God down, is what happens. So in this, they are told, don't turn back, just keep going forward. And even in the midst of this, they tell Lot to go to the hills or go up into that. And he's like, can I just go to this town, Zoar, instead? Because, that's like a long walk. And they're like, fine, just get to that city and we're going to destroy it, but don't look back. And what we do find is that Lot's wife does look back, and she turns into a pillar of salt, we're told. And that's about it. But I think what's important to realize, if we think about the story in a little bit of a bigger context, is Lot had kind of gone off astray himself. I mean, it's kind of the sense that Lot's living among wicked people. So, I mean, yeah, he's kind of saved through Abraham's righteousness is really what's happening here. But there's a sense in which we can't help ourselves to turn back to our wicked ways. There's these things that draw us, these vices that draw us back and draw us in. And it's very, very difficult to not turn back and look at what's been going on. But at the same time, we're kind of seeing that you just kind of got to put your eyes forward and think about where you're going and not where you've been. And so there's kind of that little bit of play going on here. And so we see Lot didn't look back, but his wife did, and so now she's a pillar of salt. Well, when Lot gets to the land of Zoar, he finds out that he doesn't like it the way he thought, so he ends up taking his 2 daughters up into the hills and to stay in the caves. And here we have another very interesting, not very easy to explain in today's terms. So we have to really understand it in the context of which it was written. But we find out that the 2 daughters are afraid that they are now the last to allow Lot's offspring to survive. Their mother's gone. They don't think that they're going to get husbands, and they're worried that their family line is going to die out. And so we find that the daughters get their father, Lot, drunk, and they sleep with him and become pregnant. So yeah, so incest is not good in the Bible. I mean, we learn this in Deuteronomy and the commandments, like no, 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 no. However, there is this kind of exemption for these daughters because they were trying to fulfill the promise of continuing the family through multiplying. And so there's a sense that they have this exemption because they were trying to do it. They were kind of offering themselves as sacrificial women to be able to make sure that the family line could continue on. So there's this sense of exemption from this because it was the women's choice. They were doing it on behalf of the family. And so there's that kind of sense of that. It was important for the family to stay alive, and they were doing what they had to. But at the same time, we know that our Bible tells us, like, this behavior cannot, like, incest is not good. You are not supposed to be marrying within your family like that. It's not supposed to happen. However, we do have this one scene of exemption so that a family can continue on. And so we have this chapter is full of some really hard issues to deal with and to understand. But I have to admit, for me, I think it's important to recognize the importance of hospitality and how we treat others and how we treat the stranger. And I think we all should be under some judgment. But what's lucky for us is in this time, judgment came from the skies, like volcanic ash. We are lucky enough that our judgment has been taken on by Jesus and the cross. And so we don't necessarily have to experience the hellfire. We've gotten the forgiveness. So maybe it is important that we take a look at our hospitality instead of just blowing this off as something else. And so leaves us with something deeper to look at. Maybe not a lot of excitement at the end of today, but we recognize that we're always learning lessons from our Bible, and that can give us encouragement, and it helps us to work on our faith. And so thanks for joining me today with this difficult chapter. Tomorrow we move on to chapter 20 as we continue to be traveling. And so I hope you have a beautiful Wednesday, and I'll see you tomorrow.